Welcome to this episode of Built Not Hustled, and today we're going to be answering a very common question that I usually get, but I'm sure it has gone through your mind as well. What business should you start if you have 5 million, 10 million, or you've just fallen on some capital, you've hit a deal and you want to start a business? It doesn't matter if you're looking at a side hustle, you have retired, or maybe you're in the diaspora and you want to start something at home, or you could be a student, you've tried looking for a job and things have failed and you have some capital and you're wondering what business can you actually go into and have the highest probability of succeeding. Now, I want to give this from a perspective of the systems guy, someone who has gone to different businesses, meeting entrepreneurs every single week, seeing the struggles they go through and also the successes they go through, and having seen the view from different industries. What business would I start given all this information? Now, first of all, for most people who usually get money, especially in Africa, and you want to increase your income or get something on the side, there are usually two paths. There's the traditional path and the more modern path. So the traditional path usually goes for some of these more traditional ways of making money. For example, starting a restaurant or going into farming. Farming is really, really popular, and it was actually discovered that in the lifetime of the average African, 3 out of 5 have actually done farming at a particular time in their lifetime. So it could be a restaurant, it could be farming, it could be a retail shop. Then there are, of course, the more modern things that are coming up. For example, you would want to go into Airbnbs. There's doing things like forex trading and other things. So the question is, which business would I recommend? Now, to go fully deeply into this conversation, I would want to break it down into understanding the core facets, or what I would say the core levers, the core principles that I would use as a filter for the business that one should actually go into. So the first thing that you need to think about is the margins in the business. And the margins in the business are extremely important. The margins are basically how much money do you get for every unit that you sell. So not every business is built equal. You're going to find that some businesses, for example, if you go and you are selling sugar and you buy 50 kilograms of sugar, a sack of sugar, and when you sell it, the profit margins on that sack is something like 10,000 shillings or 15,000 shillings. The margins are sometimes extremely low. For something that you might be purchasing, let's say at 200,000, and then you sell at 220,000, you have gotten a very small margin. So there are businesses that have naturally small margins. For example, if you go into selling water and soda, and every unit has a very small margin on it, you will have to sell so many units to get the profit that you want. Then there are businesses on the other scale where you have to sell very few units. Maybe you can think of something like selling a house or selling of land. When you sell one unit, the profits that you get on the sale of one unit are much higher. So one of the things that is really important about the margins is that you have to do what they call the math of the entrepreneur. What does that mean? You have to start with the end in mind. You say that what amount of money would you want to earn per month from this particular business? So if you say that you want to earn 5 million shillings per month from the business, that's what you want the business to pay you. And then you go into the business of, let's say, selling water. And for every bottle of water, you're getting 500 shillings. That means that you will have to sell 10,000 units for you to actually get the 5 million that you want. Is this a reasonable target? This is what we usually call, does the math in the kind of business that you want to start, right? If you look at, let's say, an Airbnb, right? and you say that I am rating the unit at 1 million, when I get 14 days of occupancy in my Airbnb business, does it give you a return 14 days of occupancy, which is the average for the average maybe Airbnb? Does it give you a return? For example, you're getting 1.8, you're getting 800,000 extra. Is that 800 acceptable to you? So margins are extremely important. It's something you need to consider from the start. If you choose the wrong business, you'll find yourself putting in a lot of money. I've seen people going into the salon business, for example, doing the hairdressing business, and they expected very high returns. They expected things to boom, but even with the many customers, the math just did not math. So you have to look at the margins of the business even before you start. Now, the next thing is you need to look at the complexity. Not all businesses are designed with the same level of complexity. Let me give you an example. If you look at something like a restaurant and usually food-related businesses, they usually have what we call very many inputs. There are very many inputs that are required to actually deliver the acceptable result to the customer. So when you look at the cost of making a jack chicken, for example, if you look at these businesses like Java's and all these things, you have to see that you have to put in that you have to buy the chicken, you have to bring the spring onions, you have to buy things like the oil, you have to buy the dressing, the garnishing, and all these things. So you can find that on top of the business having lower margins than some other businesses, it also is extremely complicated. Missing just one ingredient, for example, oil is not there, can fundamentally change the entire taste of the meal that you are actually prepared. There are so many things that can go wrong. You could get the potatoes are too hard or they are too soft. So you have to have a system that actually sorts these things. You can have a scenario where, for example, the workers inside there, they make it extremely complicated. So some businesses actually fall into this complicated bracket. Another business that could enter this complicated bracket, if you do not have the required systems to go for it, is something like farming. Because by its very nature, farming could be a very lucrative business. However, you can find that if the rain is too much, then your crops are going to die, they're going to rot. And if it's too little, they won't have enough to grow. If the sun is too much, then they're going to burn out. If the sun is too little, it's not enough for them to synthesize and do all the photosynthesis. There are so many things. There are pests and diseases. There are challenges in, for example, if the conditions are just perfectly right, you can actually grow whatever crop you're growing, and then you find that you're very many in the market and the prices are low. So there are very many things that are outside your sphere of control that can actually lead to your failure. So you need to understand the complexity in that particular business idea that you want to start even before going in there, before you lose all your money. Now, another thing that you need to think about is what they call the ceiling of the business that you're trying to go into. Not all businesses have the same ceiling, or what I say, the potential to grow. Some businesses can naturally grow into really big trees. And then there are businesses that are just designed to be small by their very nature. For example, there are businesses that are location bound, where for that business to operate, you must be in a certain locale. Maybe you're selling mandazi or you're selling samosas, so you can only sell to people in Nalia. Of course, there are ways in which you can do them, what we call improving on your distribution methods, and ensure that people actually get this particular product and you distribute it to millions. However, if you do not have that vision from the start, there are businesses that are naturally going to just curb you and keep you exactly where you are. So once you have gone through these filters, of course, the margin, the complexity, the ceiling, also how niche the particular business you're going into. So there are businesses that are general. What does that mean? That, for example, a general store. A general store is going to be selling things that are common to people, and they are common to people. So this particular product is what people need every single day. And then there are things that are going to be extremely niche, but they're required. Maybe you could have something like a dog shop, or things that are very niche, or a veterinary shop, or things like this. So you need to also think about whether what you are trying to do is niche or it's not niche. If it's niche, there could be more opportunities to find clients who are aligned to exactly what you need and maybe charge them more. Right? Yeah. So with that all said, the ultimate question is then, what business would I recommend for you to go in? So the first thing that you're going to do is you're going to think about, this is how much I want to get at the end of the day. Is this business able to give it to me? There are businesses where if you wanted 5 million at the end of the month, you could get them by getting 2 customers, right? And the margins could be high. There are other businesses where you need 50,000. Do the math, right? Then there are businesses which are complicated by their very nature. A restaurant is much harder to do than a washing bay by its very nature, or a cleaning business. By its very nature, they are much, restaurants maybe are much harder, or even farming. But if you have the right systems, you can go and succeed in any of these businesses. But as a first-time entrepreneur, this is what I would feel would be the best path, especially as someone who has seen systems working. The first thing that I would do is that I would observe or find someone in any industry who is actually succeeding. What does that mean? I would go to maybe someone who is succeeding in farming, someone who is succeeding in maybe delivery. They could be succeeding in any business, and I would become a middleman in that business. A middleman is someone who, first of all, does not bear the risks, especially, I could give you an example of farming. The farmer and the person who actually receives and someone who delivers to the market, they do not bear the same risks. I have seen very many people succeeding in, for example, the chicken business, the chicken farming business, but they don't necessarily go into rearing the chickens from the word go. They buy the eggs and they just distribute them, find the market. They find the market for that particular business as they observe how the farmers do it. So as the business grows, they start going downstream, but they start by solving the marketing problem. They sell and they don't bear the risk on this side, right? You can go into any successful business owner and you say that, you know what, I will, because you are selling to a certain customer and it is successful, I want to learn from you. You could actually even pay them some money just to learn how they are doing their business and work as a middleman, work as someone who is handling the client side, and you are helping them expand their business and then gradually grow into the rest of the business, or what they call the operational side of the business. If I was at campus, for example, and your capital is not enough, and you are seeing that someone is selling their shoes effectively, you can go and look for the customers of the shoes. When you get the customer, call the supplier, put your margin up, and you sell them. You are doing basically the middleman business until you understand the core business well enough to invest your money and sell. It doesn't help for you to invest 20 million in putting up a clothes line and then you start looking for customers that do not appear. But if you learn how to sell, for example, these clothes, even before you own the shop, it will allow you to understand the things that the customers want, to understand their behaviors, their preferences. Then you can put on your profit. And as you continue to learn these businesses, you can even pay someone who is extremely good at it, who has gone through the hoops of it, to teach you the different systems inside of that business. And once you master that, you can start your own clothing line with the wisdom that has taken people 10, 15 years, 20 years to gather. Remember, without systems, you will be a prisoner of your business. And I hope you have gotten something from this episode of Built, Not Hustled.